mana penilaian dari juri N1 itu sendiri, seperti itu ya. Nah, jadi untuk teman-teman peserta tim yang berdebat, nanti akan menggunakan opening branch, di mana akan melawan opening versus opening, government versus opposition, dan untuk N1 adjudicator, nanti silakan menilai sesuai dengan ketentuannya, dan juga setelah prelim nanti dipersilakan untuk masuk ke breakout room, di mana di situ ada juri seperti itu ya. Nah, untuk mendiskusikan bagaimana hasil dari pertandingannya. Oke, mungkin kita akan langsung melanjutkan ke acara selanjutnya, yaitu sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh Ketua Pelaksana FISIP Debating Championship 2021 kepada Saudari Sharon Beatrice, dipersilakan.
Oke, baik. Apakah suara saya terdengar? Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Semuanya, selamat pagi. Puji dan syukur saya panjatkan kehadirat Tuhan Yang Maha Esa, karena atas berkatnya kita pada akhirnya bisa melaksanakan FISIP Debating Championship di hari kedua ini di tanggal 18 Mei gitu untuk seleksi debat bahasa Inggris dan N1 juga. Saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada para juri yang dari kemarin sudah setia dan totalitas gitu untuk menilai dari perlombaan FISIP Debating Championship dari kemarin pagi sampai setelah maghrib, dan hari ini bergabung lagi untuk menilai di bahasa Inggris buat Mas Ramade, Kak Andris, dan juga Mas Fahrul gitu, dan juga Menteri Inoya dan Wakil Menteri Inoya, Kak Kia dan Kak Bagas, terus teman-teman staf ahli Inoya yang udah ngebantu juga dalam pelaksanaan FDC dari awal perencanaannya sampai kita udah di hari kedua nih, udah hari terakhir. Sangat saya terima kasih banget dan apresiasi banget atas kerjanya selama ini. Juga buat teman-teman peserta, saya berterima kasih kepada para peserta tim yang sudah mendaftarkan timnya gitu untuk hari ini mengikuti seleksi, supaya nanti bisa kita tahu nih siapa delegasi FISIP. Terima kasih banget, karena saya yakin di sini semuanya udah pada keren-keren banget dan akan memberikan yang terbaik juga buat perlombaan hari ini. Saya harap nantinya perlombaan di hari kedua ini juga berjalan dengan lancar, tanpa kekurangan satu apapun, dan juga terkait koneksi semoga lancar juga dari awal, semoga nggak ada yang nge-lag atau nggak ada yang putus-putus gitu suaranya dari awal sampai habis saat menyampaikan pidatonya. Harapan saya semoga semuanya tetap semangat terus, kita akan menjalani FISIP Debating Championship hari kedua ini, semoga berjalan lancar. Sekian yang bisa saya sampaikan, kurang lebihnya mohon maaf. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada Beatrice ya, dari Beatrice yang menampilkan sambutannya. Selanjutnya yaitu sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh Menteri
Halo, Al. Udah balik belum?
Halo.
Kalau itu di off cam aja dulu, Al.
Oh ya.
Stabil.
Halo, cek tes. Selanjutnya yaitu sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh Menteri Inovasi dan Karya FISIP UB, yaitu Mas Alid Bagas. Pada Mas Alid Bagas dipersilakan. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada Mas Bagas atas sambutannya. Selanjutnya, yaitu sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh Presiden BEM FISIP UB 2021 kepada Mas Nurholis Mahendra, dipersilakan.
Suara aku jelas, Syawal?
Ya, jelas Mas. Aman.
Oke. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya Rahayu, Salam Kebajikan. Selamat pagi teman-teman semua. Yang terhormat, Sharon Beatrice selaku Ketua Pelaksana FDC pada tahun ini. Terhormat Pak Dewan Juri yang sudah mengawal dari kemarin, dan yang saya banggakan teman-teman di Noya yang sudah mengkonsepkan acara ini dari kemarin juga, yang sangat bagus insya Allah dan juga maksimal. Pertama-tama mari kita panjatkan puja dan puji syukur atas kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala, Tuhan Yang Maha Esa, karena atas berkat rahmat dan hidayahnya alhamdulillah kita masih diberi kesempatan untuk berkumpul lagi pada pagi hari ini untuk melanjutkan ya hari kedua FISIP Debating Championship. Yang kedua, aku mau ucapin makasih juga ke teman-teman peserta yang udah menyempatkan waktunya untuk hadir di pagi hari ini. Semoga teman-teman di sini nanti bisa melakukan sesi perlombaan dengan baik, dengan sportif, dan juga pada akhirnya nanti FISIP bisa mendapatkan delegasi yang terbaik kayak gitu untuk kedepannya. Manfaatkan teman-teman FDC ini sebagai ajang teman-teman untuk melimpahkan atau mengeluarkan kapasitas teman-teman di sini, tunjukkan yang terbaik. Apapun hasilnya, teman-teman di sini adalah orang-orang terpilih yang sudah berani untuk maju ke depan, dan semoga bisa menjadi langkah awal ya sebelum teman-teman pada akhirnya melakukan langkah besar ke depannya. Kayak gitu, mungkin dari aku cukup sekian. Mohon maaf bila ada salah perkataan. Aku kembalikan ke Syawal.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih kepada Mas Senda atas sambutannya. Baik, kita akan melanjutkan ke inti acara, yaitu perlombaan untuk debat pada hari ini. Nah, jadi sesuai dengan apa yang telah disampaikan pada technical meeting tanggal 15 kemarin, dengan berbagai format yang mungkin sudah disepakati kemarin. Nah, setelah ini kita akan menentukan role. Sebelum kita mengumumkan mosi, kita akan menentukan terlebih dahulu tim mana yang akan mendapatkan sebagai nah, mungkin kita menggunakan heads or tails ya, jadi kayak ngundi koin kayak gitu. Nah, mungkin dari tim Yunoya mau pilih heads atau tail.
Heads aja, Kak. Halo.
Oke,
Sorry.
heads ya.
Iya, Kak.
Oke, berarti buat tim soto.
Oke. Ya, soto visi berarti tails ya.
Ya, siap.
Oke. Sebentar ya untuk teman-teman. Oke, sebentar ya untuk teman-teman. Oke, sebelumnya mohon maaf ya teman-teman ya karena ada gangguan. Mohon ditunggu.
Sorry ya teman-teman, ada kesalahan. Jadi nanti aku nge-flip koinnya. Jadi nanti yang keluar duluan itu misalnya kan heads gitu. Nah berarti nanti yang keluar pertama itu kalau keluar heads berarti dia jadi OG. Kalau keluar tails dia jadi apa namanya, opening opposition. Sorry tadi salah nanyanya. Jadi aku putar nanti yang keluar pertama buat tim Yunoya ya yang keluar. Jadi untuk menentukannya, aku flip dulu. Sebentar. Oke, jadi ini kan yang dapat, ini yang keluar tails, berarti OO kan tadi yang milih itu dari buat tim Soto FISIP, berarti Soto FISIP jadi opening opposition, buat tim Yunoya jadi opening government. Nanti di prelim 2 gantian tim opening opposition-nya itu dari Yunoya, tim opening government dari Soto FISIP, seperti itu.
Oke, seperti itu ya. Ya, terima kasih. Nah, jadi itu tadi untuk pembagian apa namanya role-nya. Untuk prelim pertama dari opening government tadi apa Beatrice? Mohon maaf. Oke, untuk prelim pertama opening government oleh tim Yunoya dan juga opening opposition tim Soto FISIP seperti itu ya. Nah, jadi teman-teman silakan. Ini untuk prelim pertama, di situ ada di kolom chat ya. Prelim pertama untuk OG yaitu Yunoya dan opening opposition Soto FISIP. Dan sekarang kita akan melihat mosi yang akan diperdebatkan pada lomba kali ini di prelim pertama. Baik, untuk first prelim, nah, untuk konteksnya, nah, silakan disimak baik-baik dan dibaca. The Association of Southeast Asian Nation or ASEAN comprise Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. At its formation, ASEAN adopted principles that have come to be known as the Asian Way, ASEAN Way. This principle places strong emphasis on national sovereignty and a commitment to non-intervention in the affairs of member states. All ASEAN decisions are made unanimously. Ya, jadi ini adalah konteksnya. Silakan untuk teman-teman peserta untuk diperhatikan konteksnya dan dilihat. Apabila ingin mencatat, kami beri waktu atau silakan langsung di screenshot untuk konteks pada mosi prelim pertama mengenai the ASEAN Way. Seperti itu, silakan. Kami hitung mundur. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oke, konteks selesai. Kita akan melihat bagaimana mosi yang akan diperdebatkan di prelim pertama. Oke. Mosinya adalah this House believes that ASEAN should abandon the Asian way. Sekali lagi, this House believes that ASEAN should abandon the ASEAN way. Silakan kepada teman-teman untuk memperhatikan mosi pada prelim pertama. Silakan untuk didokumentasikan atau ditulis dan dipahami. Ini dia mosi untuk perdebatan kita di prelim pertama. Oke, kami hitung mundur. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oke, baik, terima kasih. Ya, itu dia. Tadi kita sudah mengetahui bagaimana konteks dan juga mosi yang akan diperdebatkan di debat prelim pertama. Nah, untuk itu peserta habis ini dipersilakan untuk memasuki breakout room yang tersedia untuk melaksanakan case building. Kami beri waktu case building selama 15 menit. Dimulai semenjak semua peserta sudah masuk ke breakout room-nya masing-masing. Oke, silakan untuk teman-teman peserta boleh langsung memasuki ya ke breakout room-nya. Ada breakout room Soto FISIP dan juga Ionia. Baik, apakah dari tim Yonoya sudah masuk? Dari
Ya,
tim
semua ya.
Yonoya belum, yang atas nama Alvinda ya. Mungkin dari tim Yonoya atas nama, oke ini sedang masuk ya. Mungkin sedang ada gangguan. Oke, sudah masuk.
Ini udah semua
Udah
masuk
masuk,
belum?
bisa mulai aja nggak apa-apa, timer case building.
Oke, siap.
Oke, baik. Case building time sudah selesai. Kita akan menunggu kita sudah mengadakan case building. Mungkin dari panitia boleh announcement lagi ya ke breakout. Oke, sudah perlahan kembali. Lengkap ya untuk tim.
Halo Sawal. Udah balik belum?
Ya, lo.
Oke.
Mohon maaf ya tadi tiba-tiba menghilang hosting. Oke, kita sudah lengkap untuk semua tim. Tim Inoya sudah lengkap, serta FISIP juga sudah lengkap. Oke, kita akan langsung saja ke sesi debat. Namun sebelum itu ada beberapa pengumuman ya. Untuk interupsi, kalau misalnya nanti sudah memasuki waktu interupsi di 1 menit awal dan sebelum 1 menit terakhir, apabila peserta ingin interupsi, silakan untuk langsung on mic saja, bilang interupsi seperti itu. Dan interupsi tidak boleh melebihi 15 detik. Ya, jadi diharapkan untuk menyampaikan interupsi to the point seperti itu. Oke, kita akan langsung ke sesi debat sesuai dengan rules dan juga mosi yang tadi telah disampaikan. Sebelumnya kepada teman-teman peserta, silakan untuk mengganti format nama ya. Silakan untuk ganti format namanya menjadi role underscore nama ya. Jadi tadi yang bagian OG opening government ganti jadi OG pembicara keberapa underscore nama, opening opposition berarti OO, pembicara keberapa underscore nama. Jadi misal si A pembicara kedua ya, berarti OG 2 underscore nama kayak gitu ya. Silakan boleh diganti ya format namanya ya. Silakan untuk diganti sesuai dengan role, urutan pembicara, underscore. Nah, seperti itu ya. Itu sudah ada contohnya di kolom chat. Supaya kita bisa mengetahui. Baik, terdapat pengumuman kedua atau prelim kedua ini akan kita langsung
Halo.
Oke, mohon maaf buat tes. Halo? Oke, sebelumnya mohon maaf ya, saya izin off cam terlebih dahulu. Nah, akan dipimpin oleh para dewan juri, yaitu ada Kak Andris, ada Kak Fahrul, dan juga ada Kak Ramade, bersama N1 adjudicator, yaitu Kak Afwan. Ya, mungkin kepada juri yang akan memimpin dipersilakan.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to be the chair for this round. So welcome to the first round of FTC. So before that, I would like to have a roll call between all team. Does the OG complete?
Yes, it's completed.
Okay, is OO complete?
Complete.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, so for the judge, Anissa here.
Here.
Okay, Fahrul here.
I'm here.
Okay, sure. So without further ado, I would like to call the Prime Minister here.
Okay, I will begin my speech in. Wait, do I have to set my own time or? Okay, I will set it by myself too. My speech will begin in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Prime Minister speaking. And today, the government is proud to propose this motion that the ASEAN should abandon the Asian way. Our goal is to get rid of the old principles that are ineffective to keep the main purpose of the ASEAN organization, which is to maintain regional stability, and to make a new principle which is way more effective. Today, I'm here to address why abandoning the old Asian way is so important. And I will begin with the definition, followed by the reasons why this motion matters. And lastly, I will deliver how we will apply the motion. All right. The way the government defines the motion is, as we know, the Association of South Asian Nations, or ASEAN, is an organization that was formed in 1967 to promote political and economic cooperation and regional stability. And one of the principles that this organization have is the Asian way, which is a principle that has a strong emphasis on national sovereignty and a commitment to non-intervention in the affairs of the state members. But Today, we could see that the effort of the old principle, which is the ASEAN way, that the ASEAN has been keeping up with for a long time is not effective, especially in the case of Myanmar today, where the country really needs intervention for the good. But the ASEAN member cannot do it because of this old principle of this ASEAN way that really that stops us for helping the state members that are having crisis time, that the civil rights there are cut off. And it is why I will explain about this reasons later in my speech. And the next is, why is this matter? Because, as I said before, the old principle is not effective enough to maintain peace and regional stability, especially when one of the country member needs help, just like the Myanmar. And that is why we need to change. And what will the government do? We, the government, are going to make some changes towards the Asian principle, which is the ASEAN way. We are proposing a new principle, which we name it as ASEAN Promise. This new principle is way different than the old one, especially in the point where the old ASEAN principle limits the intervention to its country member. But we are going to let intervention in a certain time, where I will going to explain it later. And then why do we think that this old principle has to be changed? First, we see that intervention is sometimes needed. For instance, as we see today, as the examples that I have been saying from the first, one of the ASEAN members, Myanmar, is going down in the crisis under the military regime. A lot of Myanmar's people are getting killed for speaking up, fighting for democracy.
Point of information.
I'm sorry, thank you. While in the other hand, Asian principle is basically supporting democracy. Isn't this contradictory? That the ASEAN are rooting for democracy, but letting the Myanmar people getting killed for fighting for democracy. This is actually why we see that this is the right time where the intervention is needed. Why? Because we need to save the human rights along with the democracy. And that is why we believe that the old principle has to be changed to the new one. And the second, how the government will make sure that it is the right time to do intervention. It is when the civil rights and in the country's member get cut. It is where the people cannot have their own freedom based on the four rights, which is freedom to speech, freedom to live, and other freedom that they actually have to have. And no, thank you. And the time that is right to do the intervention is where there are genocides or there are military regime killing the people, just like what is happening right now in Myanmar. But how do we know that these things happen in those countries? It is through the social media or the embassy in each country's reports. And this way, if we make a change towards the old principle and apply the new one, which is the ASEAN Promise, that allow intervention during the certain of time, during the crisis when the civil rights get cut, then the ASEAN members will likely get to maintain the peace nationally and regionally. We can maintain the peace in ASEAN countries as a whole. And for this reason, we are proposing to change the old principle, which is the ASEAN way, to the new one, which is the ASEAN Promise, so we can maintain the peace by keeping the people under the right way, under the good time. And for these reasons, the government are proud to propose today. Any of my information?
PRM, ma'am?
Yes.
Ma'am, how you can prove to us that intervene is ASEAN interest to do anyway, and why Myanmar cases with Rohingya is really matter for us the moment when it's going to harm our security between country? Thank you.
Thank you. It is actually a matter for us because the members of the people of the members of the states in ASEAN are also the people of ASEAN. We need to maintain the peace in their life too, because if there is a civil right that is cut off by the government, let's say, then the ASEAN has also failed to maintain the peace regionally. That is why it is matter that the Rohingya people, that the Myanmar people lives are matter to calculate to see how successfully the ASEAN principle have been maintained by the ASEAN organization. I think that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for Prime Minister's speech. So to continue the debate, I call upon the leader of opposition here.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Please, setting up my timer. Okay, beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Single rebuttal towards the main case of the opening government, in which she claims that intervention is sometimes needed and is much needed. Within that, at this point and at this context, intervention is not necessarily needed, especially under an organization such as ASEAN. Why? Because number one, the priority of ASEAN is not direct solvency of issues and just straight up intervention. Within that, the priority of ASEAN in and of itself is rather strengthening diplomatic ties between the ASEAN countries. Right? We think that at this context, direct intervention is not within the interest of ASEAN. But even if it is true, we cannot hastily conclude an issue as being humanitarian, right? Like how the Prime Minister repeatedly mentions about how it is an urgent need of solvency and intervention in the case of Rohingya problems. Within that, we cannot just jump in the bandwagon and say that, oh, it is a humanitarian issue and Myanmar is not doing something about it, so we have to intervene. Within that is not the problem, right? Why? Because sometimes there are political roots and backgrounds that most countries do not understand, and they just bandwagon through. Say, for example, maybe in the case of Rohingya in Myanmar, you need to understand that sometimes most of these Rohingya people, the reason why they are killed are not because of their beliefs or just because they're Muslims, but sometimes most of them also seek refuge towards ISIS and they are being brainwashed as terrorists. This is one of the reasons why Aung San Suu Kyi is very, very hasty on trying to stop, most of the Rohingya people, which in and of itself is sometimes that needs to be condemned. But within that is not within the priority of ASEAN, and it's not within the urgency of ASEAN. So within that does not stand in this debate, right? But let's talk about the current context of the whole debate, right? So let's talk about our stance as the opening opposition. Opening opposition stance is simple. We want to stick to the status quo in which we should not interfere with their own affairs. We will not abandon the ASEAN way in any way possible, and we will still stick to the ASEAN way in which we will not interfere. And we will respect the sovereignty of all of these countries, right? Our goal is simple. We want to achieve ASEAN security. And if you were to intervene and if you were to abandon the ASEAN way, we think that security will never be reached and will never be achieved in the very first place. Two arguments in my speech. First, I'm going to talk about how and why we should respect the sovereignty of countries and why then sovereignty is very important. But second of all, I'm going to bring 3 layers on what harm does this cause if you were to abandon the ASEAN way and if you were to exercise intervention in the very first place. First of all, let's talk about respecting the sovereignty of the countries. Let's talk about why sovereignty is important. On the context of ASEAN countries, the reason why sovereignty is very, very important to them is because, number one, these countries are countries that have hard-fought colonialism. They have been colonialized in the past, in which Indonesia has been colonized by the Dutch, and also Malaysians has been colonized by the Portuguese, say, for example. So within that, the moment they have achieved their independence, after years of colonialization, after years of imperialism, this is the moment for them to really govern their country and to really escape the chains of colonialization. So within that, under those circumstances, this is the reason why sovereignty is very, very much important for them. So the moment they're independent, they are given the right to control and govern their own country. So if you were to intervene, that will necessarily betray their sovereignty, and that will just defeat the reason why that they are independent, is to govern their own body in the very first place, right? So you take away their sovereignty. But second of all, we think that the reason why sovereignty is very important is because sovereignty expresses some core ideas of political modernity, including the fundamentally important notion of political independence. It was originally an institution of escape from rules by the outsiders, right? So with that, most of the outsiders don't really understand the way politics works inside of the country. So we think the reason why that sovereignty is very important is because you can control the way politics works in your countries. So if you have an outsider coming in and talking and just criticizing the way politics works in your country, and you are misgoverning, we think that it will just betray, and of course it will just trigger anger towards these countries and these outsiders. So we think that hastily just saying that, oh, Rohingya is a humanitarian cause and they are killed because they're Muslims, it's not necessarily my platter, because you can still try to delve in, because we think that it is much more than just a religious belief issue, right? So we think this is something that you should really try to notice, right? Oh yeah, okay, right. So now, in the case of Rohingya, for example, like how I've mentioned before, some of the Rohingya people are hunted down and killed by Aung San Suu Kyi. It's not because the fact they're Muslims or not the fact that they believe they're Muslims, but some of them even try to seek refuge in ISIS and are brainwashed to become terrorists. Because the lack of context of the problem creates further problems and prejudice from ASEAN countries. Moreover, these countries have populations that really like to bandwagon certain issues and even provocate them into trying to make it an even bigger issue. So we think that under those circumstances, that this is not the reason why we should abandon the ASEAN way. But let's talk about the harms that it causes, right? What happens then if you were to intervene? Let's talk about firstly on how it can create unwanted policies by citizens, right? So we think if intervention does go diplomatic and if intervention does happen, right? So let's talk about how ASEAN then intervenes the country. We think that ASEAN will then create iron-fisted policies for the countries to comply that no citizens want, right? Because the moment when ASEAN intervenes, ASEAN is let's first try to characterize ASEAN, right? We think that ASEAN is a very, very strong organization, and these countries comply to ASEAN. Why? Because number one, they are still economically dependent towards ASEAN, right? Because they are newly developed countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. They really, really need the support of ASEAN. So of course they will try to bow down to ASEAN and comply to ASEAN, right? So with that, if intervention goes diplomatic, ASEAN can create iron-fisted policies for the countries to comply that nobody really wants in the countryside. Policy making should be done instead solely by the government, because the government knows what their citizens need. But second of all, let's talk about how then, if intervention happens, this will only hinder the development of these countries, right? Especially the democratic development. Why? Because these countries are newly developing democratic countries that need experience to try to deal with their own democratic problems so that they can progress further as a nation. If ASEAN keeps on babysitting them, if ASEAN keeps on intervening them, they cannot develop further, because then only ASEAN will keep on giving the solution. How are they supposed to grow as a democratic country, right? Because they really need to try to look for solvencies by themselves and not just babysitted by ASEAN, or even to the point where they are misjudged by ASEAN. But lastly, how this is then a threat and a harm towards ASEAN security. This will further be elaborated by my second speaker, but I'm just going to tell you that if ASEAN is to intervene, the worst case scenario would happen is that there will be an all-out war in which some of the ASEAN countries will go to war to stop a certain issue. Say, for example, how Indonesia is very, very sentimental towards Rohingya. Of course, they will try to respond to the calls made by ASEAN, and of course, they will want to go to war in trying to stop the whole cause of the Rohingya problems, right? This will only cause greater wars and will only put a political instability in the ASEAN in and of itself. And even in the worst case scenario, this integration can happen. This will be further elaborated by my second speaker. So to point everything out, we think that ASEAN should try to stick to the principles of the ASEAN way, in which they should respect the sovereignty of the countries. No interference is needed in this status quo, and in this context, very, very proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you so much for the opposition. To continue the debate, I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the government. Our goal is simple. Firstly, we just want to get rid of these old principles that are not effective. And the second one, we want to make a new principle that we think it will effectively implemented in our regional organizations. I will come up with my rebuttals before I go into my arguments. Firstly, the OO has said that as like we don't respect the state members' sovereignty. So it is a completely misunderstanding, right? So what my Prime Minister said that we don't respect this sovereignty. We do respect the sovereignty of the Asian state members. Yes, we agree that they are independent. They are an independent state. They are free of colonialism. But we have to remember that the state members are formed this kind of Asian organization because of what? Because they want to maintain the regional stability, because they have the same interest of the other members of other states in those kind of regions. So it is not relevant when the OO say that we don't respect their sovereignty. We do respect the sovereignty of every state members in the Asian region. And the second one is OO has said that this kind of intervention will make ASEAN stability be harmed. And we say that it is very bad analysis, right? So the stability doesn't work if there are harm problems or a conflict that happen in our state members, in one of the ASEAN state members, and we just close our eyes and don't help to solve these problems. And this will drive to the not stability regional. So when they all say that this kind of intervention will harm the stability, it is completely wrong, right? Because and the third one, the OO has also said that how can ASEAN knows what the citizen wanted actually. The OO also said that the government are more understand what their citizens want in the nations. It is actually not relevant with status quo today. If the government actually know what their citizens want in their nations, then the case of Myanmar, like a coup d'etat, will never happen. Like this case is break the OO's arguments that the government always understand their citizens thing that they want. And then how can we make sure that OO has also mentioned that how can we make sure that the intervention that we do are the thing that the citizen want. So firstly, it will be correlated with my arguments. Firstly, as what my prime minister said, our goal is to get rid the principle that are not effective. The other way is not effective. Why? Because it limits the other member state of ASEAN to help the one of the members that have the conflict. It limits them. For some cases, maybe it will harm another state. For what I said before, like this coup d'etat, if we don't take an action, it will harm the political stability in our regional. And why it will get like this? Because every stability in every country, in one of the country, is stability in the regional. So it is not good if we just let them suffer with their conflict. And also, we know that this coup d'etat, for example, makes people die. Some of people are being a victim of the soldier, and this is not a thing that we want, right? The intervention of humanitarian is needed to this case, and some of the members of ASEAN are don't have intention to do intervention because they uphold this kind of principle, which is the ASEAN way. So this is very bad, right? So we want to make a new principle, which is our second goal. So we want to make a new principle that, as my prime minister said, it is a ASEAN promise. How this principle will works? In this principle, we will emphasize that we still always be respect to the every state member's sovereignty. We always respect them because we know that they are independent state, right? But also in the certain times, in the certain conditions where we think that it will harm our stability, we can just sit down and see is going on. We have to take actions and do the interventions as the citizen want to do. We can see in some cases, for example, in the this coup d'etat, their citizens ask help for another countries in ASEAN, for example. They ask to give a pressure to their regime to like being cooperative with the democratic party. And this is what a thing that we don't want happen in the future. We as the government want to maintain the stability of our region, and also we still and always respect their sovereignty. Under the all analysis and argument, we are proud to propose today.
Okay, thank you for Deputy Prime Minister. To end the debate, I call upon Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So, I will start my speech. Bentar. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. What we regret from the OG is how they never understand the context of Asian itself and how they never explain to us why at the end of the day Asian can do so and why at the end of the day it was the interest from the Asian at the very first place. Firstly, we have to note that in Asian, they have the same background on economy, military, and culture, and also they are coming from the East country that always respect each other's sovereignty, ladies and gentlemen. They have to prove to us why the same background, it will never create an endless war because we have the same power at the end of the day. Secondly, they never explain to us on why at the end of the day Asian is capable and why Asian can understand what is the best for a country that have their own problems, not Asian problems, ladies and gentlemen. That's why if OG want to win in this debate, they have to prove to us that 2 questions from us, from OO. Our stand is simple. First, we want to prioritize the security of Asian that we already had since the beginning from Asian, that it was because the existence of Asian way. That's why at the end of the day, we have the security right now. Going to my rebuttal. Firstly, the only argument that coming from the OG is they want to maintain peace in Asian country, but they never explain to us why at the end of the day, Rohingya is really matter and create harm to Asian country diplomacy that they try to hold at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. They are failed to tell what is the urgency of Rohingya to the Asian. The fact is, not all of people in Asian have interest with the Rohingya cases, ladies and gentlemen. Only Indonesian government that do the demonstration about the Rohingya lives. We never see any discussion coming from different countries in Asia, such as Singapore, Laos, or Filipina, and also demonstration in Indonesia is also happening on a season, not every day, ladies and gentlemen. This is the proof that the case of Myanmar, especially Rohingya, is not really matter to solve us as an Asian at the very first place because it was not our interest to do so at the end of the day. What Asians should do focus is their purpose to security, maintain diplomacy that will be broke from the OG proposal, ladies and gentlemen. The moment when Asians try to solve their economic problem because most of country in Asia is developing country, but then OG tried to give and adding more problem to Asian with solve the problem that only exists between between an ethnic and also a country. Secondly, they think that, oh, I want to change the Asian way because it's not effective anymore. What kind of ineffective way from Asian way that they think, ladies and gentlemen? The goals of Asian ways is really clear. It was to maintain the diplomacy and security in Asia. And yes, Asian right now still stable and better than any region organization. For example, like EU. The reason why EU failed to maintain their security in organization and make UK choose to do Brexit because the policy country under EU can be intervened by other country that make UK society think they don't have sovereignty anymore. So they choose their sovereignty, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to blame Rohingya cases, it's not for the Asian fault, but the fault of their internal factor, it was Myanmar government, ladies and gentlemen. That's why the problem between us ethnic and country should be solved by a country itself, not Asian itself, ladies and gentlemen. And I will prove to you why at the end of the day, the moment when they try to erase the Asian way, it will worse the scenario of Asian, and they also never explain to us what they will do after the Asian way is their erased, ladies and gentlemen. Argument that coming from the OG is saying like, if there is a fire, you should not give oil, but OG give oil and they burn a whole region, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, why when we have the same background, it will worsening the condition? different from conflict that happened in the Middle East, and there is intervention from the US. The conflict that happened in the Middle East is bigger, and US have a big power, and they are in different places, in different region area. The moment when US intervene Middle East, such as Iraqi war, Iraq government also want to revenge US for what they have done. But then Iraq cannot come to US because it's really far away from US itself.
Point of information.
That's why at the end of the day, it's strategically correct to intervene, because first you have power in technology. Secondly, US country is far away and hard to Iraqi to revenge to US because missile can go to US. And thirdly, they don't have any dependency. Different from Asian when we have a dependency on diplomacy. Why it's not correct when it's coming to Asian, ladies and gentlemen? Firstly, on geographically, we are close. We are Asian that have bordered only land and also sea, ladies and gentlemen. And also we have a diplomatic relation that depends each other. For example, in Asian economy, society, ladies and gentlemen. And secondly, we have the same power in the military at the end of the day. This is the reason why opening opposition is going to win in this debate, because we characterize the condition. Because if we do the intervention like what OG wants, such as coming to a country, then put our military there to solve their conflict problem, it will going never to be solved the problem and adding the escalation to war, ladies and gentlemen. Because what? Because we have the same power. Means what? Means never ending war, because we have no chance to win the war at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. And secondly, we are so easy to attack, ladies and gentlemen. The problem that first is between race and also state like Rohingya with Myanmar will going to be bigger, will going to be more costly and create more harm, because it will create a war between a state with another state, and also create a block in Asian, that at the end of the day, Asian way will never going to be exist. Asian purpose, the reason why they create this organization, will going to be broke anyway, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we think it is so problematic. Secondly, why OO think that our diplomacy way is right now is better? Because first, we want to priority peace and security in the Asian, because it was our first maintained goals of Asian itself, ladies and gentlemen. Condemnation that we already do or try to talk situation with other prime ministry, it is so good, ladies and gentlemen, compared to intervention that OG want, ladies and gentlemen. Because first, we want to maintain the diplomacy. If we have a good diplomacy, at least Myanmar government will want to hear our voice, because they also depend to us. But the moment when we intervene, it will create that, oh, Indonesia is trying to attack the sovereignty of Myanmar. Indonesia is not friend of Myanmar anymore. But then, if the problem of Myanmar and Rohingya is not solved, it's not our problem anyway, ladies and gentlemen, because the one that have unstable political security condition and also economy is Myanmar. At the end of the day, Myanmar will also want to make their country better, because a lot of nations see Myanmar have a bad reputation, ladies and gentlemen. The one that have responsibility to manage the name of Myanmar, it was Myanmar government itself. The one that have to maintain the security in Myanmar, it was Myanmar government itself. If they don't want to do so, then it was their choice anyway, and any country will never going to get harm. That's why we think that Asian way is already chose and have the same interest what we want as an Asian. That's what all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the leader of opposition. So thank you for the debate. So I give the chair to the committee.
Baik, terima kasih atas debatnya, dan terima kasih kepada Mas Ramadhan yang telah memimpin untuk debatnya. Kali ini prelim pertama telah selesai. Kita akan melanjutkan ke prelim kedua dengan mosi dan role yang berbeda. Namun sebelum itu kita akan memberikan waktu selama 10 menit untuk istirahat. Kami meminta sebelumnya kepada teman-teman peserta untuk tidak live terlebih dahulu, supaya bisa memulai acara dengan tepat waktu agar bisa selesai dengan tepat waktu juga. Ya, sekali lagi kepada para peserta untuk tidak meninggalkan terlebih dahulu agar kita bisa memulai tepat waktu, dan waktu istirahat hingga jam 11.50. Dan untuk adjudicator, Dewan Juri maupun N1 adjudicator dipersilakan untuk memasuki breakout room untuk adjudicator. Sekali lagi, untuk juri dan juga N1 adjudicator dipersilakan untuk memasuki breakout room ruang juri. Terima kasih. Baik, selamat siang. Waktu sudah menunjukkan jam 11.50. Kita akan melanjutkan sesi kita ke sesi prelim kedua, di mana kita akan melanjutkan perlombaan untuk menentukan siapa yang akan menjadi pemenang dari perlombaan hari ini dan siapa yang akan menjadi perwakilan FISIP untuk UBDC. Seperti itu. Nah, kita akan menunggu dari juri akan kembali ke room utama setelah berdiskusi. Oke, kita tidak perlu mengumumkan role lagi ya, karena tadi role-nya sudah apa istilahnya sama untuk yang tadi opening government oleh Inoya dan juga opening opposition oleh Soto FISIP, dan sekarang akan ditukar untuk Soto FISIP akan mendapatkan role sebagai opening government dan Inoya sebagai opening opposition. Maka dari itu kita akan langsung saja mengumumkan mosi untuk perdebatan kita di siang hari ini. Mohon maaf sebentar.
Sudah terlihat? Halo, slide-nya sudah terlihat?
Sudah.
Ya, halo sudah.
Sudah.
Ada yang belum masuk room dari Inoya. Udah masuk semua. Bisa dilanjut.
Oke, sudah masuk semua ya. Sekarang kita akan membacakan untuk mosi di perdebatan untuk second prelim. Oke, mosi untuk second prelim adalah, oke, silakan bisa disimak, bisa dibaca dengan baik-baik. This holds would hold multinational company, corporation, or an enterprise that manage production or deliver service in more than one country, i.e. Apple, Microsoft, Nestle, Coca-Cola, etc., legally liable for the harmful human rights impact caused by its supplier. Supplier is a person or organization that provides something, it is such as a product or service. Oke, silakan untuk teman-teman peserta diperhatikan mosi pada perdebatan di prelim kedua. Terdapat mosinya, silakan untuk ditulis atau didokumentasikan. Karena mosinya lumayan panjang, silakan.
Boleh tanya nggak ya?
Ya, silakan bagaimana?
Enggak sih, aku cuma pengen make sure. Berarti ini hold-nya itu dalam maksud apa? Sama, oke, udah itu aja.
Halo Kak Yasha.
Iya.
Sebentar ya, karena jurinya aku panggil sebentar ya, Kak.
Oke.
Sorry, sebentar.
Oke, kepada peserta dimohon menunggu. Baik, berhubung dari salah satu dewan juri yaitu Kak Amadi sudah bergabung, dipersilakan mungkin untuk memberikan konteks terhadap mosi di perdebatan kali ini. Silakan.
Iya, mana PPT-nya?
Oke, panitia boleh di-share screen lagi ya.
Okay. Under this motion, is there any question?
Yes, I want to
Yeah.
ask about what is the meaning of hold, and the one that do human rights violation is suppliers, not the company itself, right?
Sorry, apa? Supplier?
Hold itu tadi itu maksudnya gimana? Terus yang lakuin itu kan suppliernya kan Kak, bukan company-nya yang lakuin human right violation.
Oh, jadi yang pertama hold itu berarti lu bakal melakukan legal repercussion ke salah satu multinational company ini. Jadi, for instance, kamu bisa aja ngajuin apa sih namanya peradilan ke US atau ke negara asalnya atau di beberapa negara yang ke-affected itu, it's up to you how to defend. Nah, by its supplier adalah ini tuh maksudnya orang, ini kan franchise kan sebenarnya, corporation ini. Maksudnya kayak kalau Apple di China berarti beda sama Apple yang ada di Amerika. In a sense, manajemen sistemnya. Nah, by its supplier adalah orang yang mensuplai semua barang ke salah satu perusahaan ini. Jadi semua Apple tuh dapat apa sih namanya biji timah itu dari Indonesia. Nah, orang di Indonesia ini contohnya ngelakuin illegal mining kayak gitu. Nah, these multinational company are aware of that dan still doing that and accepting this kind of crime gitu. Result of crime, raw materials.
Oke.
Contohnya banyak sih. Udah.
Udah Kak.
Oke, kalau nggak ada question lagi ada question lagi? Oke, kalau nggak ada silakan lanjut.
Baik, terima kasih atas penjelasannya kepada Dewan Juri Kamade. Mungkin teman-teman tadi sudah dicatat dan disimak bagaimana mosi untuk prelim kedua. Selanjutnya, seperti biasa, yaitu sesi case building. Dipersilakan teman-teman case building untuk memasuki ruangan breakout room-nya, lakukan case building sesuai dengan nama timnya masing-masing. Case building akan dimulai ketika seluruh peserta sudah memasuki breakout room. Silakan.
Kabarin ya kalau udah masuk semua.
Oke.
Oke.
Untuk tim Yonoya tinggal atas nama Alvinda. Baik, waktu case building telah habis. Kita akan menunggu kepada seluruh peserta untuk kembali kepada room utama. Baik, selamat siang. Selamat datang di prelim kedua FISIP Debating Championship 2021 Bahasa Inggris. Sekarang kita akan memulai lomba untuk debat di prelim kedua di sesi kali ini dengan mosi yang tadi telah disampaikan dan juga dengan role yang sudah terpilih. Nah, untuk itu kepada teman-teman peserta dipersilakan untuk mengganti format namanya sesuai dengan role terbarunya. Silakan dari tim Soto FISIP maupun tim Yonoya. Untuk Soto FISIP mendapatkan posisi sebagai opening government dan untuk Inoya sebagai opening opposition. Baik, dikarenakan sudah mengganti semuanya, untuk teknis perlombaan sama seperti prelim pertama, dan untuk lomba akan dipimpin oleh juri. Dipersilakan.
Anissa, please.
Test, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Roll call for participants. Yes, semuanya. Oji?
Here.
Yes, ma'am.
Here.
Okay. Fahrul?
Here.
Ramadi?
Here.
Anyone? Is there anyone here? Afwan?
Present.
Okay. All right. Welcome to the second prelim of FDC. Without further ado, please welcome the Prime Minister. Time is yours.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Let me set my timer first. Beginning my speech in 3. Oh, wait. Make sure everything is okay. Right. Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Multinational companies are very, very capitalistic in nature. They really try to exert much pressure to its workers just to try to make every penny and the last drop of dollar they can. We think this is very, very problematic in the very first place, right? Because these people are capitalistic in nature and they just want everything for themselves. They really want to try to exert as much profit as they can, and they will just try to cross the lines and borders that they are set in the very first place just to try to make their extra money. We think that at the moment where they're suppliers, which they are very, very capitalistic in nature, but they're also big, right? So they have suppliers, and in the moment where the suppliers also commit harmful human rights impact, if they commit that in the very first place, we are instead of attacking the suppliers, we're going to go to the root of the problem, which is try to hold the multinational companies liable in the very first place. We're going to attack the root of the problem, which is the multinational companies, if they are proven to have suppliers that really condone and endorse human rights impact and violations. Right? How are we going to hold them liable? 2 steps. Firstly, we're going to try to go to the grassroots solution, which is try to boycotting. which in a sense that we're not going to buy or we're not going to buy the goods and stop the purchase of goods produced by the companies that abuse human rights. The example of, say for example, Danone, in the example of in which Danone is accused of supporting Israeli forces bombing Gaza, we will try to stop the purchase of Aqua, say for example. We will not try to buy the products created by Danone, so that we can stop the human rights abuse in the very first place. But we do understand that boycotting is not enough, right? Why? Because these are multinational companies, meaning that they have a lot of money that they can generate. Hence, within that, sometimes the boycott is just not enough. But in the occasion where the boycott is not enough, we're going to proceed to a much more legal institution, which is lawsuits and bringing it to court, right? What do we mean by this? We're going to prosecute them to an extent, not wanting to dissolve it, because we understand that these multinational companies are companies that we still need in daily life, right? It is necessary for us to try to obtain their goods, right? But we want to try to prosecute them so that we can try to eliminate the people and the actors that really condone and support the human rights impacts done by suppliers. So we think these two steps are the steps that we want to try to castrate and try to hold these multinational companies legally liable in the very first place. We think that if we were to prosecute them, we think that they will still function, right? Because they are business giants. This prosecution instead will be an attempt to clean off the companies from bad hands and also bad actors that causes all of these human rights violations. Our goal is simple. Our goal is to minimize and punish the companies that does not look over its suppliers and does not look over its sister companies in trying to protect human rights. Because the moment when you are a multinational company, you need to understand that you have you are this big role model that everyone needs to look up to, especially your suppliers and also your sister companies that are still in business. They're still your business partners, right? Because the moment when you hold business with people that really violate the human rights, we think that this is immorally incorrect, right? So it's very, very problematic in the very first place. Our urgency is that in the current status quo, a lot of human rights violations happen in industrial sectors, especially, right? Let's talk about how people are underpaid, or even the phenomena of child labor, say for example, or even the dissolving of labor unions and sexual assaults in workplaces. This is very problematic, and hence why we think this is a very much needed mechanism in trying to stop all of these problems, right? 2 points of contentions in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to talk about why should we hold the multinational companies liable instead of the suppliers in and of itself. But second of all, let's talk about what happens then if we don't hold them liable. Let's first talk about why we should hold the multinational companies liable. Let's talk about the multinational companies. We think that the multinational companies are the head of the product itself. They are the one that should provide ways and ethics of how to work towards their suppliers. They are the ones who have to set examples toward their suppliers. Right? They are the ones who have to try to convey the philosophies and the principles of how the companies work. Say, for example, if your company really supports, if your companies move in a way that you support veganism or you support the fight against child abuse, you should make it clear to your suppliers so that they would not try to exercise it, right? Or you should make it clear to your suppliers what your goals and what your visions and missions are. So that they are the ones who have to set examples to its suppliers. And in the case where the suppliers cause human rights violations, in the case where the suppliers do commit human rights violations, that it is because the multinational companies are negligent in educating their suppliers or sister companies. Why should then it be the moral obligation of these companies? Number one, they are big as a brand. These multinational companies are already, well-branded and well-known in the public places. They have principles and they have philosophies. A lot of people consume these products and look up to them in a way that, they want to try to maintain their image as good as they can, right? Because you need to understand, the current status quo is very, very progressive. People are already politically aware of in the moment where a company, has backings that really violate human rights, right? And they really want to try, and these companies have the interest of trying to maintain their image as a human rights supporter. So they should be able to educate the suppliers and sister companies. But second of all, that is still within the interest. It's still within the interest of multinational companies to try to gain consumers and try to maintain their consumers. Right? Why? Notice how in the current status quo, consumers are now politically aware and politically correct on trying to identify the company's backgrounds. Say, for example, how people choose to consume vegan milk instead of going to the traditional cow milk, right? Or if the company is proven to be abusing human rights, they will not want to buy it, right? To do this, they have to maintain and ensure that every part of their company is well structured and do not commit human rights abuse. So we think that this is the reason why, if then the suppliers does exercise human rights violations and human rights impacts, we think we should try to persecute directly towards the multinational companies and legally hold them, right? Like the example of Nestle and child labor. Nestle has a lot of factories around the country, but employs child labor to minimize costs so that they can make much more money, right? So it is problematic because this is directly coming from Nestle's and not its suppliers. So we think that these big brands and these multinational companies should be able to set certain examples towards their suppliers and their sister companies. But second of all, what happens then if we don't hold them liable? We think that if we don't hold them liable, the multinational companies liable, they will just keep committing these human right violations, right? Why? Because suppliers will be shut down. In the case that suppliers are shut down and are boycotted, these companies are big enough to just create or look for other suppliers because they have that much money and capital. If we hold them liable directly, we can attack the head directly and possibly cause it not to function properly. Because if this happens, then it kind of disrupts the function and how it works, right? Because the moment when you are faced in a lawsuit, your image will fall and people will just boycott you because people in Carl School are politically aware of the things happening, especially when you commit such things such as child labor and other stuff in the Carl School, it is very problematic. So we think that if you want to try to cut off and if you want to try to fight the human right impact, you do not fight the foot, you fight the head directly, and this is why we should hold these multinational companies. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now to start the case from opposition, please welcome the group opposition. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
All right, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The chair, ladies and gentlemen, the opposition team is extremely opposed to the government's idea for holding multinational companies legally liable for the harmful human rights impact, because we believe that the supplier's fault is not the company's responsibility, and our goal is to defend the companies from the accusation from the things that they didn't do. Today, we are here with our rebuttal. First, the Prime Minister was talking about the punishment, but from what I heard, the government didn't even explain how are they gonna punish the company, what kind of punishment would they give. And then the second, the Prime Minister said that the company has the responsibility to be clear with the suppliers, that the companies have to make sure that their suppliers do not violate human rights. But we see that the government cannot take it to further consideration that the companies never allow the human right violation, but there's a possibility that the suppliers only showing to the company the good thing, that they are just saying that they treat the workers well, but behind that company, the company cannot really make sure what is happening because the suppliers are hiding something. They are doing the other thing than what the companies see in front of them. And now I will address the reasons why the opposition team are going against this motion. It is because, first, the company is not responsible for the supplier's crime accusations, as what I say in the first place, so especially when it comes to human rights violation. The company like Apple, Nike, and other big companies never allow human rights violation to happen. Just like what is happening in China, where the suppliers of some companies are cutting off the human rights of the worker. In the end, the company is the one that get a bad name, a bad reputation, and it at the end affect the company's financial, which any company never want that to happen. That is why we are saying that the company is not responsible for the supplier's crime accusation. It is fully the responsible of the suppliers. And the second reason why we are against this motion today is because there is a possibility that the suppliers have shown to the company that their way of working is okay, that they are not violating anyone, that the workers are fine, they treat the workers fine. But in the other hand, they are doing the things that is harming the workers. So what I'm trying to say is the company, once again, never ever allow or support anyone to break the law, especially when it comes to human rights, where the company, I think all the companies, big companies, are knowing that human rights is such a big and fundamental issue. And the third reason why we are really extremely against this motion is because we think that that the human rights violations that is done by the suppliers, it is actually the responsibility of the government. The government is the one who actually have to make sure that there is no human right violation happening to the workers within their own country. The government should have make a strong law that could avoid this kind of things happens. They are the one that is responsible fully for the violations of human rights of the workers within their country. And if there is any violations of the human rights happening in their country, it is actually the fault of the government that they are failed to protect the workers, that they are failed to protect their people. And that is why we are extremely, once again, against the idea of the government for holding multinational company liable for the harmful of human rights. Because as I said in the first place, it is not the fault of the companies, but we can put this responsible. It is responsible on the government, because it is actually they're responsible as the government to protect their people within their countries. And for this reason, we think that the government should have turned their eyes to the suppliers, the one who does the violations to human rights. The government is the one who actually have to check and to make sure that the suppliers in their own countries, the suppliers that are hiring people, hiring the worker, are doing the right thing, that they are not harming other human beings, that they are doing their work in the right way, that they don't think that they don't do the thing that they shouldn't do. And again, for these reasons, we think that the government is the one who is fully responsible for this kind of things. I mean, this kind of things refers to the human right violation. And those reasons are the reason why today we are, the government, so proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now, to continue the case from government, please welcome Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Sebentar ya Kak, aku mau minum dulu. Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. What we regret from the opening opposition is they try to stick with the status quo, where they pro to the capitalist world, where the global world doesn't have any right to defend themselves and see as someone matter, and see that their right is also matter, ladies and gentlemen. What happened in the status quo itself? It was we only try to victim to blaming the supplier itself without knowing that this company, that this MNC have a role to control their supplier at the very first place. If they also see that human rights matter, ladies and gentlemen, why at the end of the day this can be happen? Because we think that to maintain multinational company means that the moment when you buy that MNC, you have terms and regulation that MNC give to you, and you have to apply it at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But then the opening opposition never characterized what kind of characteristic that coming from the MNC. They think about the human right is matter or not, or they only think about the profit oriented itself, ladies and gentlemen. Because we think that opening opposition try to maintain the multinational company to becoming only focused on profit and forget about the condition of worker class, and thinking to create a preventive to make their life secure, ladies and gentlemen. That's why at the end of the day, we will prove to you why MNC is also have role to manage the condition of their supply, ladies and gentlemen. If opening opposition want to prove to us that multinational company is not evil actor in this capitalist world by forgetting the right of workers, they should answer one matter question, ladies and gentlemen. What is the characteristic from multinational company, and why at the end of the day their characteristic is moral to let them not be counting for this problem, ladies and gentlemen. First, we characterize that multinational company is profit-oriented. That's why they never think about the condition of other people. They only think about the profit, how much that they will cut, ladies and gentlemen. Going to my rebuttal, first of all, they try to portray that, oh, this MNC doesn't know about the human rights violation that exists in a region or maybe in one suppliers. We say no, ladies and gentlemen, because right now we can see it in social media. We can see it on Instagram because there is a lot of media that portray, for example, Coca-Cola in India that do violation right to people in India that make people in India cannot get access to water, ladies and gentlemen, because Coca-Cola try to capitalize their water, ladies and gentlemen. We can see it on news, we can see it and search it on Instagram. But what MNC Coca-Cola do is that they refuse that they don't do it and they don't have any relation to that, ladies and gentlemen. You have to know the reason why MNC in Coca-Cola in US try to portray that, oh no, we're the one that not do that. It was the fault of Coca-Cola in India because they want to prioritize their name, they want to prioritize their profit-oriented, so their name will going not to be harmed about the human right, ladies and gentlemen, even if they can manage it at the very first place. That's why at the end of the day, we see that MNC also the immoral actor because they only focus on the profit-oriented itself, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, they try to portray that, oh, it was the government responsibility to do so. It was government, the fault of the government itself, ladies and gentlemen, because we think in OG that the one have a responsibility to do so is MNC. What government do is maintain and see what is the problem that exists in their country, ladies and gentlemen. The problem that exists in the country, not only human rights that exists because of supplier, but there is a healthy problems, there is an education problems, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, government only punish the supplier itself, ladies and gentlemen. That's why in other supplier, they still maybe do the human right violation, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we think government have to do more, ladies and gentlemen, in order to make sure that their society condition is going to be better. Because we think that human right violation is something that we universally say that it was wrong, ladies and gentlemen, because United Nations and in SDGs also promote the name of human right itself. That's why we want to make sure that all of the supplier, all the people that already done the human right violation will going to get the harm. The moment when and I will prove to you why, the moment when we call the MNC, it will change the regulation and also characteristic of the company. The reason why multinational company right now still use and human right violation on their supplier, it was because of the benefit that they get. Why? Because for example, in case of H&M, they use 14 years old children to become their workers because these children can they pay cheaper compared to experience blue-collar job in adult age. Why? Because these kids prioritize only to get money to add. No matter how they pay, they just take it for granted because they don't know about their right as a children, ladies and gentlemen. This supplier using the weakness of people to get more income that we see, this is so problematic, ladies and gentlemen. But then H&M still do the same thing. The moment when people try to portray that, oh, supplier in Myanmar do this harmful thing, H&M try to not see that problems. That's why H&M in India still do the human right violation, ladies and gentlemen. It will going to be different if we let multinational company hold and them become the one that do the violation itself, ladies and gentlemen. Because if H&M go to the court, at the end of the day, the name of H&M will going to be dangerous, ladies and gentlemen, and it will make H&M try to change the regulation on their company franchise term and regulation by putting and make sure that their supplier not allows the human right violation, ladies and gentlemen, because multinational company is the one that have power to change the system in MNC by holding MNC is also accountable, ladies and gentlemen. If the supplier do harmful thing like this, they will not adjudicate the supplier itself, ladies and gentlemen. So supplier will follow one or not, they will follow the rule that coming from the MNC itself, ladies and gentlemen. And secondly, we want to create a strong narrative awareness about human right. Human right is something universal that almost everyone in this world agree that is something that you can violate at the very first place, ladies and gentlemen. For example, US with liberty ideology, or every country in UN try to promote SDGs about the human right, ladies and gentlemen. That's why if government want to look better in the non society, they should promote the law to maintain the whole to MNC. Why MNC? Because MNC is the one that famous, the one that get branding, the one that get benefit much more than the supplier itself, ladies and gentlemen. If we want to create a strong narrative, by hold accountable to the one that famous, it was the MNC. It will create a big impact. If we only focus to supplier, it will not counter other supplier that coming from different country to do the same thing, to protect the human rights. That's why if we want to prioritize the life of worker, we should make sure that H&M are also MNC company to change the regulation by let them to go to court and try to maintain the human right at the very first place. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now to close the debate, I would like to call the deputy leader position. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the opposition team to extremely oppose the motions. Madam Chair, our cause is simple. We just want to defend the company from the things that they actually are not doing and the things that they actually out of their responsibility. And the second one is, we want the government repair their performance, not just punish there and punish here. Firstly, I will come up with my rebuttals. Number one is the OG has said that the characteristic of MNC is profit-oriented. So this is not very relevant, right, with the status quo today, as we know that even though the MNC profit-oriented, they also maintain their good image to the society. They also maintain their performance throughout their consumers and other hosting countries that they hold this company. So when it is said that the company all just oriented on the profit, it is actually wrong. And the second one is, OG has also mentioned that this kind of violation to the human rights has already available in the social media. So this is not making sense, right? Even though there's some of them are shown in the social media, it is not all of them. You can see some of them, but there's a lot of things that hide behind the scene, behind the social media, behind the media that never been touched by people. And the third one is, OG has also mentioned that MNC is improve their profit by, for example, hiring the children workers. So we can't generalize this thing, right? You can see in the other cases, for example, the US cosmetic company, when they are hiring the children workers, it doesn't mean that they completely do the violations or they completely just looking for a profit with paying them less. But we can see that it is a both sides profitable. As what I gonna say is, these children workers maybe need the job to feed their family. We never know what happened in their region where those poverty are high and in the high range. Maybe these children are helping their family to be to work, to looking for a job, and this company actually help these children to find an income to help their family economically. So we can just say that when the MNC are hiring the children for workers, they just oriented on a profit and because it is pay less. So it's very wrong because it can be both sides profitable for the company and also the children. And then the last one, the OG has also said that MNC have to follow the regulations of the hosting country. So this is the right thing, but the supplier is more have to follow the regulations of the country. Why? Because we know that the MNC are bigger and have more suffering than the supplier. I mean, these MNC are well structured and has their power more than the supplier has. So when the OG say that MNC has to follow the government laws and government should focus on the MNC, it is a very bad analysis because they don't think that the supplier is a very fundamental aspect, fundamental thing that the government should focus on, not just on the MNC. So our argument is, I want to emphasize my leader goals. So we are defend the company from the thing that they actually not do. If we don't deny that this responsibility of hiring suppliers is the responsibility of the MNC. This right, but how can we make sure that in front of us these suppliers are showing the legal formal documents and they show us maybe the places where they took the kinds of things that will be supplied to us is legal, is their own, and they are the owner. But we never know how they will. The MNC not always know how they treat their workers, how they use the workers to looking for that kind of things to be supplied to us. So this kind of thing is already exists in the world today. We know that anything can happen behind those kind of documents. We never know what the worst thing will happen. And the second one is we want the government to repair, improve, increase their performance. If they are just focused on the MNC, whereas the MNC is not their own, MNC just host in their the country is just be a host country for this MNC. They actually not care about the citizen, their citizen which is the suppliers. So I mean, what I gonna say is, when the government want to make sure this kind of human violation not happen, they should focus on those who did it, not those who are far from this case. The MNC may have the responsibility to hire the supplier, but the supplier even can do anything behind those formal documents that the MNC will never know. Under the analysis, we're proud to oppose today.
Thank you for your speech. That wraps up the second preliminary. Thank you for all the debaters. Now, please wait for the announcement from the committee. Thank you.
Baik, terima kasih kepada Andis yang telah memimpin perdebatan di prelim kedua, dan terima kasih kepada seluruh peserta debat, mulai dari tim Opening Government dan Opening Opposition yang telah melakukan debat untuk mosi di prelim kedua ini, dan selanjutnya dari Dewan Juri dan juga N1 akan melakukan tabulasi penilaian kepada teman-teman yang tadi telah berdebat, dan sekarang kita akan isomal terlebih dahulu ya. Nah, jadi buat teman-teman dipersilakan untuk istirahat, kemudian bagi yang muslim silakan untuk melaksanakan ibadah sholat, dan jangan lupa untuk makan siang seperti itu. Nanti kita kembali lagi sekitar jam 13.20 untuk untuk pengumuman kira-kira siapa yang akan menjadi juara dan juga siapa yang akan menjadi delegasi FISIP untuk UBDC. Dan kami mengingatkan kepada teman-teman semua untuk mengisi formulir, ya, mengisi link yang ada di kolom chat. Di situ ada link pengawasan FDC 2021 dari DPM FISIP UB. Nah, silakan untuk teman-teman mengisi formnya ya. Silakan untuk mengisi formnya yang ada di link chat, ada di kolom chat, bit.ly pengawasan FDC 2021. Silakan untuk teman-teman peserta untuk mengisi. Dan pada Dewan Juri dipersilakan apabila ingin melakukan penilaian dan juga tabulasi, dipersilakan untuk ke breakout room juri seperti itu. Oke, mungkin dipersilakan apabila teman-teman telah mengisi link yang ada di kolom chat untuk bisa langsung istirahat dan kembali kepada room jam 13.20. Maksimal 13.25 seperti itu. Terima kasih teman-teman semua. Kita sudah melewati 2 kali prelim dalam perlombaan hari ini. Alhamdulillah kita sudah menentukan siapa saja yang akan menjadi delegasi dari FISIP untuk acara UBDC di 2021. Dan penilaian berdasarkan penilaian yang dilakukan oleh tim Dewan Juri, yaitu ada Kak Fahrul Ahyan, kemudian ada Kak Andris, dan juga tes, halo. Dengar ya suaranya?
Masuk.
Oke, mohon maaf tadi terputus. Dan juga Mas Ramade, dan beserta juri N1 adjudicator, yaitu ada Mas Afwan, seperti itu. Dan untuk mengumumkan, saya undang, yaitu perwakilan dari adjudicator, ada Mas Fahrul, dipersilakan.
Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan selamat siang ya semuanya. Ini terdengar atau tidak?
Terdengar,
Sorry.
Mas.
Sorry ya, ketekan. Anyway, kita langsung aja ke, mungkin bisa share screen PPT-nya. Ya, oke, sebelum kita lanjut, first and foremost, aku dan mewakili juga juri berterima kasih banyak terhadap panitia-panitia yang sudah berjuang dari hari pertama. Terima kasih banyak MVP panitia. Thank you very much, Beatrice. Aku juga ingin mengucapkan terima kasih banyak bagi peserta yang sudah mau mengikuti seleksi. I hope walaupun mungkin tidak lolos, I hope that everyone masih tetap semangat untuk berdebat, semangat untuk melestarikan critical thinking. Dan I can only say thank you very much for everyone. Thank you very much for participating in the selections. I cannot say enough thank you for everyone. So without further ado, next slide, please. Yes, so the FISIP delegations for UBDC 2021, we're going to go directly to them. The delegations are congratulations to Aisadina with the total score of 150 for the average of 75. And for the second person is Muhammad Faiz with the total score of 149 with the average of 74.5. Congratulations to both of them. Wait, you can clap? Oh, nice. Yes. Congratulations untuk Aisyah dan Faiz. And for the rest, and for the one that's going to be the adjudicators will be Afan Muhammad Rizki. For the delegation, I would say one, congratulations to be selected as delegations for UBDC, and keep on the spirit. This is not the last fight. You guys are going to have a fight in UBDC. Jadi semangat terus, keep on fighting. And for the others, I hope you guys also going to keep the spirit and fightings to debate and stuff like this. Thank you very much for everyone. Congratulations again. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada Mas Fahrul yang telah menyampaikan pengumuman untuk pemenang dari perlombaan hari ini. Dan kami dari panitia mengucapkan selamat kepada teman-teman yang telah lolos untuk seleksi hari ini, yaitu ada Kak Aisyah Dinar dan juga Mas Faiz dengan skor masing-masing 150 dan 149 dan berhak menjadi perwakilan FISIP untuk UBDC bersama Mbak Awel dan juga Mbak Laras seperti itu. Dan juga selamat untuk N1 adjudicator untuk delegasi FISIP, yaitu ada Mas Afwan Muhammad yang hari ini telah menjadi N1 adjudicator. Dan kami ucapkan terima kasih untuk teman-teman semua, terutama dari kedua tim, kepada tim Inoya. Terima kasih dan selalu tetap semangat, teman-teman semua ada yang terbaik, tapi kita di sini memilih hanya bisa memilih 2 di antara 4 seperti itu ya. Nah, mungkin itu kali ya untuk
foto bareng
perlombaan hari ini. Terima kasih kepada teman-teman semua. Nah, sekarang kita akan ke sesi dokumentasi. Nah, jadi untuk teman-teman yang sekiranya untuk on cam yang tidak ada kendala jaringan, tidak seperti saya mungkin ya. Nah, mungkin teman-teman boleh menyalakan kameranya ya. Jadi persilakan. Ya, para peserta boleh ya, dan juga teman-teman kakak juri, juga teman-teman panitia, apabila tidak ada kendala bisa dinyalakan kameranya. Terutama untuk Mas Mbak yang tadi pemenang mungkin ya bisa dilihat juga. Tapi untuk kakak-kakak dari tim yang lain juga nggak apa-apa, semuanya kita on cam ayo.
Dan teman-teman bisa on cam. Awal nanti bisa pimpin jarak yang serius.
Oke. Ini udah on cam semua belum? Aku di sini nggak bisa ngedeteksi sih, soalnya pada mati semua.
Belum, nggak apa-apa sih. Kalau nggak bisa ya nggak apa-apa.
Okay.
Kita lanjut aja.
Oke, siap. Ya mungkin kami beri waktu 3 detik ya untuk teman-teman yang mau menyalakan kamera. 3, 2, 1. Oke, nggak apa-apa. Kita dokumentasi. Saya pimpin. 1, 2, 3. Oke, sekali lagi mungkin 1, 2, 3. Oke, baik. Terima kasih kepada seluruh peserta dari FISIP Debating Championship yang telah berlomba pada hari ini. Terima kasih juga kepada para dewan juri, ada Kak Andris, Kak Made, dan juga Kak Fahrul yang telah bersedia untuk menjadi adjudicator selama 2 hari ini. Terima kasih juga kepada Mas Afwan yang telah menjadi N1 adjudicator. Dan tak lupa kepada teman-teman panitia semua yang telah bekerja keras di 2 hari ini selama sepanjang harinya ya, bertemu dengan layar lagi seperti itu. Nah, oke, mungkin terima kasih. Kami tutup. Selamat siang. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Terima kasih banyak semuanya teman-teman.
Terima kasih semua.
Terima kasih juga.
Semangat.
Terima kasih banyak semuanya.
Terima kasih.
Faiz.